Welcome to the Tanika Chambers Show, where I talk about love, life, and faith with some pretty amazing people I know. On today's show, we're focusing on love and how courting and engaged and married couples can come out of COVID-19, the lockdown, closer than ever before. And to help me to do that, I've invited Coach Drew back on the show. And he's going to give us some tips and suggestions on how we can strengthen our relationship. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Drew. Are you there?
I am here. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Tanika.
No problem. So, you have been coaching couples for a number of years now. And I just wanted to know, what do you think are some conflicts that this pandemic is posing for couples right now?
Well, there are some unique aspects that this particular situation is bringing for many people. And depending on where you're at as an individual, are you prone to anxiety? Are you prone to depression? This can
Mm,
actually exacerbate those experiences. So that's one thing.
right.
But then, if you actually are a frontline worker, the risk is, much higher. Some people have the privilege of, staying at home and just watching the news and thinking about conspiracy theories, whereas other people, they are
Hmm.
really in the thick of it. So,
Yeah.
what if somebody is working in COVID and the other person isn't? Like, how do you navigate that? Do you come home? Right? Do you still share a bed? Do you still share a home? Like, there are a lot of different aspects that can happen to impact families. And then,
Right.
what if somebody does get COVID, right? That
Mm.
healing process and
Oh, yes, that
um
14-day lockdown, right?
right? And what if you get terribly sick and you almost die because of COVID? Like, do you go back to that same job? Like, you
Wow.
know, I work with a number of teachers, and it's really anxiety producing to know that every time you go to school, you're
Hmm.
gonna be exposed to children, teens who are gonna be exposed by their parents.
Yeah.
So it does raise some really significant concerns for many people that are unique to COVID. And then there's the reality that, some of our challenges, they existed long before COVID. And
Right.
then now, because it hasn't been addressed and you didn't take the opportunity to do the work, you
Right.
know, now here you have this
Coming to the
challenge.
surface.
Exactly. I was walking down the street one day when COVID started, back when I was living in Brampton, and I just asked the police officer, so what are you finding, with COVID? And he said, well, petty crime is down because
Okay.
people aren't going out as much, but
Right.
domestic calls have skyrocketed. They've gone through the roof.
Wow.
So, it's indicative of, I think, the fact that a lot of times, as I mentioned before, when we don't address these things and we don't build a skill to address these things, because
Right.
listening and talking and
Hmm.
communicating effectively, those are skills. They don't just happen automatically, right?
Right.
Yeah, they're skills. And when we don't have that skill set, and then on top of that, if our coping mechanisms are taken away from us,
Mm.
like, then it really increases the potential for conflict. A good
Right.
example would be, going to the gym. A lot of people
Right.
burn off steam at the gym.
Right. Right.
And what do you do when you can't go to the gym? Right?
Right.
Or some people cope with,
Or going to
quiet
church.
time. Right? Yes,
I mean, we do
right? They
have
go to
the
church.
online, but still, it's not the same, right?
No, it's not. You can go in fellowship with other believers and you can sit and
Right.
you can talk, you can pray, you can commiserate, you can do all that stuff. And then
Hmm.
suddenly you're at home and you're working from home, you're parenting from home, you're online parent, student teacher from home,
Yes.
like, and your husband and wife from home, you're cooking, cleaning, doing all this stuff. It's like you're on all the time, and then you get burnt out. You never thought you could be burnt out from your home life?
Uh,
Like, a lot of people are burnt out and they don't even know it.
I read a quote that said, tough times could be a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, like I said, all of these experiences,
Right.
it's a mindset, it's a decision that we can commit to
Mm-hmm.
see the blessing, right? To see,
Yeah.
I'm in jail right now. I'm shackled here, but let me just sing some praises and see what happens, right? Let me learn how to rejoice in the middle of the situation. So
Yeah.
with respect to COVID, I can personally confess
Yeah.
that so many times when it first came out, I thought I had COVID. Like I had COVID like 10 times. Okay, right. I died and was resurrected. Thank God for resurrection power, because I was holding my breath. I was like, doing the breath test, because my chest feels tight, and all my nose is runny. Like I had every symptom.
Wow.
And but COVID, every symptom is like, it's everyday life. You have a cold, you have COVID, right?
Right.
You stressed out,
Right.
you have COVID, right? You
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
sleep, you have COVID.
COVID.
So so I it's an opportunity to hear God and really, really say, okay, what are you saying to me here? And
Mm-hmm.
I remember, God said to me two words. He said, "Fear not."
Oh,
Fear
amen.
not. And I had to learn what that meant in this context,
Mm.
right? It was just two words, but it wasn't until I unpacked it and then had the opportunity to apply it. Okay, you're telling me that I need not worry about the situation. So
Mm-hmm.
whether I have COVID or not, it's going to be okay.
Yes.
So right? So it was no longer about the COVID. It was then about what God told me. Okay,
Right.
I'm going to believe you. I'm going to
Exactly. And
trust you,
one
right?
one word from God can change the entire outlook and perspective for
Right.
sure. Yes.
Right. So, when we see the opportunity and we engage with God around what is He saying to
Yes.
us now,
Mm-hmm.
that's an opportunity. Um, and if you are invested in growing yourself, there's always going to be something, right, that
Yeah.
you can focus on, that you can control, and and you can really invest and pour yourself into, despite what's going on.
Right. Um, I have a mom, and she wants to send her children to school. She's in a relationship. She's engaged. Her children, the guy she's with is not the father of her children, and so she was very comfortable sending her children, wants to send her children, but her fiance doesn't. So how does a couple work out these kinds of differences while keeping the peace in the home?
Hmm. Wow, that's a loaded question. That's a loaded situation.
Yeah.
So again, the opportunity here is, let's define what peace is.
Mm,
Right? It's important to understand that, because some people think peace is the absence of conflict and all
right.
those kinds of things. So,
Right.
what does peace mean?
Mhm.
So that's one part. But,
Right.
situation like that, it's important to recognize that there are many parts and pieces to this. And there
Mm,
are actually several goals that we can actually be working on all at the same time,
okay.
which becomes problematic. It's very difficult to get on the same page when you have multiple goals at play.
Mm,
So, in this situation, let's say we could pull several goals out. Okay, this is a family that's becoming a blended family.
mm-hmm. Oh,
How do we
right.
do that?
You're
Right?
right.
How do we make decisions as couples, as a couple? How do we make a joint decision? First of all, is this a joint decision? Right? What what is your role and what is my role as a blended
Right.
family? So there are lots of models. Someone would come in and say, well, the man makes all the decisions, and
Mm.
someone would come in and say, well, the parent, the biological parent of
Parents
the
should make the
children, they
decision.
make the decision and you support their decision, right? So there are lots of different, ways to look at it.
Mm,
But then there's also the reality, okay, well, who are these children? Do you make a blanket decision for these children based on your opinion, or are you parenting this particular child?
mm,
So for a child who's really, really anxious, or a child who's really, really struggling in school,
mm-hmm.
right, with the online thing. So it might be better for one child to go back to school. It might be better for another child to stay at home. So what are we doing? Are we prioritizing the needs of this child? So and what if one of the parents is overly anxious, right?
Right.
One You can see that one
Yeah.
scenario has many potential goals here, so it's going to be important to figure out what are we working on here. Let's pick
Okay.
one goal at a time and address it one at a time. So being in a hurry to make that decision is just not the best thing,
Okay.
right? You want to slow it down and really identify what are we talking about here. Let's
Right.
pick one and work through it one at a time. Because if we're saying, what, you're anxious, well, let's really understand how anxiety works.
Okay.
Anxiety is basically a picture of the future that is really negative, right?
Okay.
Anytime you worry about the future, you're going to feel anxious.
Right.
So, but the question is, what are are they worries or are they legitimate concerns?
Literally. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's worries where you just spin the wheels and you imagine worst case scenarios and you don't,
Yes.
do it, you get stuck there.
Yes.
Whereas another one is a legitimate concern, because
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with families through COVID and things like that, and there's a situation where, okay, well, you live at home with elderly parents and you're going to go to
Right.
school with these
Right.
kids who are you're a loving person. They're going to run up and hug you. That's what they're
Yes.
going to do. And kids are getting COVID too, because a lot of before people are like, oh, kids don't get COVID, right? That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be a valid, legitimate concern. So to dismiss that and just say it's because you're anxious, that's not fair.
Right.
So when you can actually slow it down and say, okay, let's address this. Let's look at that. So part of peace is actually understanding, right? You can't have peace with somebody that you don't understand. It's just like you
Right.
can't love somebody. You can't really love somebody you don't know. Peace
Right.
is really about understanding. So, how we get there involves really listening, getting clear on what the concerns are, and hearing the
Mm.
other person's point of view. And then you make your way towards joint decision making where appropriate.
Right. It's in the book of Proverbs that talks about in all thy getting, get
Get understanding.
understanding.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite all true scriptures. I count on that.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So
Well,
that's
if
definitely important when we have very
right.
multi-layered situations.
Get the understanding, focus on the understanding.
Yeah, figure out what the goal is, agree on what we're working on, what we're working towards, and
Right.
then we make decisions on that.
Awesome. Thank you. So
Hmm.
let's talk about the different kinds of emotions that could happen right now, that could be raging. We're sharing this interview right now on February 14th, which is known as Valentine's Day. So, time when couples are showering each other with love, hopefully. But what if they're feeling a number of negative feelings and emotions like anger, frustration, or worry because they're uncertain about the future, finances, things like that? So, how can they, in a healthy way,
Hmm.
detach themselves from the situation and enjoy their relationship?
Once again, there's a lot there's a lot to this question. So it really depends on
Yeah.
the current status and situation
Yeah.
of the couple. So a couple with, 6 kids, all under the age of 8, at home during COVID, Valentine's Day might look very different
Yeah.
than, a couple of people who are empty nesters. It may look very different. Um, so the reality is that I think there's always room to be real, to be authentic, and to be present. I think in the midst of that, there's so much room for love,
Yeah.
right? When you watch those, what do they call them? Rom-coms and all those drama
Oh,
movies.
yeah.
It's not the really elaborate, fine dining, kind of things that really move people's hearts.
Right. It's the more
It's when,
sentimental.
yes, it's when you
Yes.
see me, right?
Yes.
It's when you see me, when you see that I am tired and you know that I've been working on this thing for so long and you watch this project burn to the ground. You see that
Yes.
I'm crushed. and you come and you sit with me and you say, I love you, and I'm not worried about this project because I know God has put a purpose
Yeah.
in your heart and in your life. That is
That's
love.
good. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a full range of things. So the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I mentioned that is similar to what we were talking about earlier. Every
Right.
challenge is going to present an opportunity. Well, the
Right.
same thing is true about our emotions. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't define anger and frustration as negative. I would
Mm-hmm.
describe those emotions as unpleasant or even intense, but they're not
Right.
bad,
No.
right?
No.
If you know, it's like some people, they don't like feeling sad,
Right.
and they believe that if you feel sad, then you're going to be depressed, or that's a sign of weakness. You know, none of that is true. I think if you get stuck in sadness,
Right. Then it
you're
can become.
that's going to be problematic. But we don't get stuck in sadness because it's an emotion. It's the thoughts that are fueling that emotion. Thoughts, they fuel emotions. So
Right.
emotions are neither good nor bad. It can be
Mm.
appropriate for the setting. So if somebody dies, it makes
Yeah.
sense. Somebody you care about, if they die, it makes sense to feel sad.
Right. The grief. Yeah.
But yes, but at the same time, if you know that they're going to heaven, it makes sense that you feel joy too. Regardless of what emotion you are experiencing, when we can be with each other in those moments and love
Okay.
each other and support each other, then you're going to have a healthy experience that can roll over into something that is really beautiful.
Right.
Because we every opportunity um, is going to give us an opportunity to grow closer together, to know each
Mm-hmm.
other more, to come out of this experience stronger than we went in.
Right.
So I do think there's a time and place to say, you know what, we've been dealing with a lot of heavy stuff. Let's just take a break, right? Let's just take a break from all that stuff, an intentional break from that stuff, and just have a quiet moment where we're not going to think about that stuff.
Right.
But that's very different than, you know, let's avoid this and never really talk about it, because
Mm-hmm.
then we don't really have the chance to grow through that together.
Right. Well, Drew, you're definitely someone who's very self-aware, and not many are that in touch with their feelings. So that can make that could be a little challenge, or
Hmm.
challenging, I should say,
Yes,
in a
yes.
relationship if someone is not in tune emotionally.
Yes. So you described me as self-aware, which I appreciate because I
Mhm.
like the word awareness. And that is something that we all have blind spots, but increasingly we become more and more aware. And a lot of the times we are not in tune with our emotions, like you said. We're not
Mhm.
aware of what they are. We're not really skilled at negotiating and navigating them. So we just try to, you know, sweep them under the rug, and
Right.
we sweep our trauma under the rug. And we don't realize that is forming the culture of our relationship. That is forming the culture, the emotional temperature and environment of our household. If we
Mm,
avoid things, we never get better at working through them.
through
So
them.
whether you work and work and work and work, or you do drugs and do drugs and do drugs, or you drink, or you have sex, or
Right.
whatever it is, all of these things can be coping strategies. But coping is not the same as dealing and changing and growing. What if somebody has to work, somebody has to work, and somebody has to work? And I I think there's a reality that we don't have to do anything,
Mm,
right? I don't have to go to work. I choose to go to work in order to provide, right? Because I my provision that God is giving me is coming through this channel. However, if I find that this job is killing me,
yep.
I can trust God's going to provide for me another way. I get to choose, you know what? This is not working. There has got to be another way.
Yes.
There is another way.
I,
And when we get stuck behind, I have to do this, I have no choice, then are you really living? It may sound unrelated, but
mm,
the strength of a relationship is really going to be based on the emotional health and wellness of the individuals in the relationship. So the ideas that we have and that we hold that inform how we live our lives, that is also, as individuals, that is going to shape the strength of our relationship. It's going to inform the culture. So
Yeah.
everything that we do, everything that we say, how we think, what we believe, all those things matter. That's why perpetual growth is an opportunity for us. If you're not growing, your relationship's not going to grow. And anything that's not growing, guess what? It's
It's
dying.
done.
I love the work that I do and I get to do with people. And when people say things like, oh my goodness, I realize I see this pattern now. Like, I appreciate you walking me through this because now I see, I understand. Like, an example would be, you know, all or nothing thinking. This idea that, and how do you know that you're using all or nothing thinking? Well, if you're journaling, it becomes a little bit more obvious, right? If you know how to journal, um, and if you don't, by all means connect with me for sure. I have a resource for you. It's called Six Effective Keys to Journaling, right?
Oh,
6 keys to effective journaling.
oh,
But
wow.
when you learn how to process your emotions, even in journaling, because I journal as a prayer, and I talk to God about what I'm feeling, there's a difference between what you feel and what you think. So
Mm,
when I label what I feel, which is one word, Lord, I'm feeling discouraged. Well, what thoughts are contributing to me feeling discouraged? Well, when I'm saying this is never going to work,
mm.
I always come back to this place. Why am I here, God? When you realize, oh, never, this is never going to work. That's an absolute. Oh, always, never, everyone. Oh, okay. And then you realize, wait a sec. I use this language with my kids.
Ah,
Oh, uh, my parents use this language with me all the time. Oh, that's where it comes from. Oh, it's a thought pattern. Well, then as you're writing it out, you're just like, well, I always come. Actually, that's not true. I don't always come back to this. Sometimes I do. Okay, well, that makes sense. When I come back to this, I'm feeling discouraged because I'm imagining it not working well.
right.
But right, but it has worked well. So when you learn how to label your emotions, define the thoughts, and incorporate new language, that's going to change the thought, and that's going to change the emotion, and that's going to change how you live. If you're not aware of what you're thinking and how you're speaking to other people, or what
Right.
you do when you're listening to other people, then the results are just going to happen the same way, and you're not going to be able to change anything. So you increase the awareness, and then you learn to be intentional with, your words and your thoughts, and
Yeah.
then your emotions are going to become congruent with
Yes.
those thoughts.
And how do you become more like that? What would you suggest?
It's There are several things that you can do. One of them is journaling. That's a big one.
Okay.
Another thing is slowing. I talk about this in the webinar. Slowing the process down.
Mm.
Right? Sometimes we're moving through things so quickly
Ah,
that we don't realize what we're saying. We don't realize what we're doing with our faces. We don't like. We're just not aware.
yeah.
Right? You can also connect with other people. You can ask people for their thoughts, right? If you know somebody's a pretty objective and well balanced person,
Yeah.
ask them, I'm wanting to grow in this area.
Mm.
People have told me this about me. Do you
Mm.
think that's true? Right? You
Mm.
pray about it and you say, God, is I want to grow in this area. Can you give me some insight?
Mm.
Right? Those are 4 different avenues that you can go to
Mm.
start moving in that direction.
That takes courage,
Those
doesn't it?
Oh, it definitely does. It does. Trust me. Trust me. I asked my wife the other day because I'm going into this, I'm doing more workshops about listening and all those things. So I asked my wife, so, what do you think about me as a listener? Right?
That's a good
That
question.
it's a very good question. I have a self-assessment here about how to listen and how to communicate, and it's good for you to assess yourself and then ask the people in your life, and does it match up? You could think that you're a listener at 9 out of 10, and then when you ask your husband or your wife and they're like, you're a 2, you're at a 2. Okay. You need to come up a little higher.
Right. Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's important. Ask your
And
kids.
your spouse will tell you the truth.
Well, it depends on when you catch them, right? You catch them. You gotta catch them at a good time because if they're angry, you might get a two, and if they're in a
Right,
good
right,
mood,
right,
you might
right,
get a
right.
seven. It depends, right?
Yes.
So you're right. It does take courage, and I think everything good that we obtain,
Hmm.
it does come from God, and
Yeah.
it often requires us to exercise that courage, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, lastly, your book, The Art of a Genuine Apology. So much great information in there to help strengthen relationships. Um, can you repeat a little bit just in case somebody's watching right now and they done messed up last night and they owe their spouse or for those who are card courting, they're engaged, and they owe an apology. So how would they give a genuine one?
Oh, sister, there's absolutely no way I can fit all that in just a
I
few
my
minutes.
loaded questions, right?
So the best thing you can do is buy the book.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, that's good.
buy the book. It's well worth it.
Yes.
So I will. I don't want to. As opposed to just starting out with the steps, okay, there's
Right.
4 steps that I will get into, and you could always hop on my YouTube channel, Coach Drew Can, and you can see all the videos there, walk through the steps there as well. But what's important before you even approach offering an apology is that you appreciate the values woven into an apology. Okay, there are 5 values woven into an apology. There's humility, there's vulnerability, there is authenticity,
Yes.
there's responsibility, and accountability.
Mhm.
All those things. Sorry, I said authenticity. That's one of my core values. I meant to say empathy, right?
Empathy.
Empathy. They're critical all the way through a genuine apology. So some people think a genuine apology just means I'm sincere. No, 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 no. Sincerity doesn't cut it. It's an important element
Right.
because you could be sincere about wanting to move past this moment. You could be
Ah,
sincere about wanting your partner to get over it. You could be sincere about hiding what you really, really did,
ah,
right? The underlying stuff that you don't want your
right.
partner to know about. So you really confess this top thing. Like, sincere is important, but
Mhm.
correctly focused intentions, that's another thing altogether. A genuine
Mm,
apology is going to seek the healing of the hurt party first, above all else. That's
mhm,
the goal. If your partner never forgives you, are you still going to offer that apology? If
mm,
your partner does not offer an apology in return, are you still going to offer that apology? Do you
mm,
really understand the impact of what you did on your partner? Can you kind of say, when I did this, I see that it impacted you this way, right?
right.
And I know that this bothered you so much because this happened, 10 times before, right? If you don't understand that, then your apology isn't going to go the distance. It's
Mm,
not it's right. Taking responsibility for what you did is one part,
right.
but understanding the depth and the impact of the infraction or the hurt,
Mhm.
that's what's going to move that apology. And then, as everybody knows, if you do not have a plan so that this does not happen again,
Oh,
the chances are it's going to happen again. And that apology that you offered, although sincere, that's going to become a wound, right? That's going to become a
ah,
weapon, right? You're going to end up hurting that person because you apologized, but you didn't have a plan, right? So
wow.
a genuine apology, you break it down, it has 4 steps. You want to list. Okay, you want to be very specific about what you did. That's number one, because a genuine apology lives on long after you've offered the apology. So
Right.
the 4 steps break down. It's an acronym. Live, right? Live. So L, you want to list and label. Be very specific about what you did. Okay, you want to take responsibility. I, you want to imagine the impact. Okay, you want to
Mm,
label the emotion. When I did this, it impacted you this way. I can see that it hurt you, right? I can see that, you know, it broke your trust. I can see that, right?
Is
You're
that where the
imagining the
empathizing
impact.
is? Is
That's
that where the
right.
empathizing happens? Okay.
That's right. And in the webinar on listening with love, and in one of the, I'm doing a coaching course for couples,
Oh, awesome.
and one of them is what is accurate empathy. That's one of the parts, right? You can feel something, but it goes the distance when you actually know what it is that your partner is feeling,
Mm,
when you can label that, right?
yes.
You can feel hurt, but you can also feel robbed.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There's difference, right? There's
Right.
different. If you hurt me, it's one thing, but if you steal from me,
Mm,
if you rob me, you violated me,
mm,
right? Because somebody can look at what they did. Well, all I did was look at a little porn. I didn't have sex with somebody.
yeah.
But if all this person's life, all her life, she wanted somebody who was going to be faithful to her. She
Right.
waited for somebody who would be faithful. And you're saying all I did was look at a commercial. You know, I didn't really do anything. That's not her experience. She's like, you
Right.
robbed me. I waited 30 years for this, and you
Mm,
took that from me.
mm,
If your apology does not get that, you're going to be like, well, why won't you get over it? Well, she's not going to get over it because you don't get it. But when you get it,
mm.
when you're like, oh,
That's good.
I get it, then she's going to get that you got it. And
Right.
then you're on the road to healing. But until then, mm-mm. A
And
lot
then
of
when
people
that
think,
person feels the pain of the other
yes,
person, then
yes.
that will help them to change the behavior.
Well, and that's a big part of it, right? We're
Mm,
talking about like that godly sorrow that works repentance.
right.
Like there's
That's what
there's
I mean.
regret and then there's remorse. Okay?
Right.
A lot of people will regret what they did, but there's no remorse because it didn't
Mm,
impact them. They didn't feel it. Right? They feel
mm,
guilty. They feel bad. Yeah, I hurt her. But that when you really get it, then you tap into remorse, and
remorse.
that brings change. Well, it starts to bring change, but that's where we move to number three, the third step. This is where, and that's V, where you verbalize a commitment to a plan of action. This is
Mm,
the big thing that people miss out on.
yeah.
Again, I said earlier, if you don't understand how you got there in the first place, if you don't understand your own history of how you started watching porn, or
Mm,
what it does for you, or what the struggle is, right? If you
yeah.
don't understand that, guess what? What do you think is going to happen? If you don't work through it, you're going to go back there.
To
It
do it
has
again.
nothing to do with your intention. If you do not grow that awareness and get, like we said, get that understanding, then you can't have a plan of action. And you can't verbalize that commitment to a plan of action if you don't have a plan.
Right.
And then why
Mm,
would she trust you if you don't even have a clue about how you got there, right?
mm,
Promise is only as strong as the person's awareness. Like
yeah.
you can't promise. You can't promise me something that you don't own. You
Right.
can't give me
Right.
something you don't own. And a lot of times we don't have ownership of our own story. We don't have
Mm,
access. We don't understand it. So we can't give what you don't own.
right. That's
So
powerful.
that's right. That's important.
Yeah.
So as a lot of people think, I apologize, and that's no, 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 no. You get to pull that back, unpack that thing,
Yes.
look at it, and then you say, okay, yes, I see it, I understand it. God, thank you for showing me this. I understand. I understand. And then you can come back to your partner and say, well, when I impact you, do this way. You're not going to make an excuse for it. And just because you have this understanding doesn't mean that you actually share that understanding, because
Right.
it often can sound like an explanation, which can sound like an excuse,
Mm,
right? I'm telling you, the book is good. Fairness, you can say, you know what, you know, I am apologizing for doing this. I know it impacted you this way, and this is what I'm gonna do moving forward,
mm,
right? This is what I'm gonna do because it matters to me that you never feel this way again,
mm,
that I do everything
mm,
in my power so that this doesn't happen again, right? That's
right.
only step three. But that speaks to accountability and responsibility. And that's where we start to see the emotional repair that leads to reconciliation. Because just
Mm,
because you stay in a relationship doesn't mean you're reconciled,
right. Right.
right? There's a big difference. Somebody can forgive and not be truly reconciled. right? Forgiveness takes one, but reconciliation takes two. It takes agreement. And this is where the last step comes in, the E. You extend an invitation to that person to speak back to you, to talk to you about your apology, to talk to you about how they're feeling about this whole thing. A lot of people, they do the drive-by apology. You know, they just spray, I'm sorry for this, sorry for that, and then they want to move on.
That's
No.
funny.
That's not how it works. That's not how it works. You want to be able to endure and say, you know what? I want to hear what you have to say. Is there anything? Did I miss anything? Because I want you to heal. I want you to understand that this matters to me. Right? No strings attached. The person might be like, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but I don't trust you.
Yeah.
I accept your apology, and I want some time. Or they might be like, you know what? I really receive your apology. And you know what? I want to take ownership for this part too. Right? Even though you might want that, that's not the goal. There's no guarantee that you're going to get that.
Yes.
But when you do understand how to offer a genuine apology, trust me, healing starts to happen. I've seen it happen.
I
And
can
it's not just for
feel it.
couples.
I can
Yes.
some serious healing.
We have the opportunity to perpetually pour in to our relationships, right? We often think, okay, it's fixed now. We're good now. And then we stop pouring in.
Oh,
And
that's good.
That's not the way it works. Keep pouring in. The scriptures tell us, be ye not drunk with wine wherein is excess, but be ye filled by the Spirit. Pour into it. You invest in it, whether that means coaching or reading a book together or praying or growing yourself or thinking positive, wonderful things about your partner every single day. Is you pour every day to be fruitful and to multiply. Like, you know, that just doesn't mean having children. For us to bear that fruit. So I'm grateful to serve. I'm grateful that there's fruit coming out of my life, and I want to keep it going.
Well, there you go. You want some of Drew's fruit? Go to his website, man. So we're going to put the handles below of Drew's website, and he's on IG as well. So you can follow him on IG and, you know, plug into all the stuff that he has available to us to strengthen our relationship. So I just want to thank you again, Drew, for coming on and spending time with me today. And
always a pleasure, Tanika. Always a pleasure.
We have one more show in our Detach Yourself series. You don't want to miss the next show. It's going to be powerful. And remember that God has a master plan with your name on it. And we will see you next time. Bye for now.